Hey everyone, welcome to the Roast War on Everything. We're coming to you just a little late, 2 days late. Sorry about that. We are trying to stick to a stricter schedule, but life gets in the way every now and then. And,
it got so hot the sweat stuck us to our beds.
Yeah, we are currently going through like a never-ending heat wave in Perth. Like, honestly, it's the hottest ever February, I believe, and we're not even at the end of it yet. And tomorrow is 43. Day after that is 41, and we've already had a 43-degree day. It's like we're living in Saudi Arabia or something. It's bad. Anyway, let's get on with today's content. And, well, I just had to start with this story today. It's the one that basically pissed me off the most out of everything I read. So, that is, we have new proposals by our Jewish Attorney General to outlaw what is commonly known as doxing in Australia. That's right. It could
sounds good, doesn't it?
Just wait. Yeah, well, look, they are pushing for it to be criminalised. Now, yeah, I mean, a lot of our guys, if they were to just simply hear that, with no context, well, okay, forget the bit I said about a Jewish Attorney General, just pretend I just said, new laws to ban doxing. Yeah, I mean, most of our guys would go, okay, good, like about time. You're likely to know someone whose life has been affected by that very practice. Certainly, if you move in these circles, you're definitely going to know at least one. But why did this actually come about? Because a bunch of Jews got doxed. That's why. And they actually got doxed in a pretty benign fashion, let's say. But, of course, the kvetching has been absolutely hysterical ever since it happened. And, of course, need I mention the hypocrisy here in terms of how often they've used doxing. And now when it just comes back to bite them in a very, very small way, they are going absolutely hysterical. So anyway,
I was actually talking to some Americans about this, and they didn't have the full context of like why this was on the books. They just saw a headline and read it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that must be a good thing, right?" And on paper it does sound like a good thing. It's the main tool used against us. But then I had to explain to them,
right.
No.
So look, what we want to do now, we want to unpack this a little bit to see whether or not this could actually turn into something good or bad or whatever. To be honest, right now, I don't really know. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise, I'm not sure. But anyway, context of this is, it was around 600 people who were part of a WhatsApp group. And this WhatsApp group contained people who are known as creatives. You heard this term? Being bandied about lately, basically to describe Jewish people who work in media or entertainment or academia. In other words,
it sounds like an Italian brother trying to peaceably explain the sexuality of his brother to their grandmother. Tony, he's a creative,
Well, yeah, I mean, look. You kind of, the way I look at it is, it's any position of influence. Are you in a position to actually influence the culture in which you live? And of course, once Jews influence culture, it's usually for the worse. And this specific group is, as you can imagine, very pro-Israel and very anti-Palestine. And, we're doing things like letter-writing campaigns to get certain people sacked, as they do, okay? Which involves identifying people, by the way. So I also saw this term creative recently when I read this story about this group called Creative Community for Peace. So this is, I believe, a recently formed NGO or lobby group, whatever you want to call it, whose main campaign at the moment is an open letter to the European Broadcasting Union. And that is on this support, the pressure that it's on them to ban Israel from entering the 2024 Eurovision Song Contest. Okay? And of course, again, it being creatives, it's got a lot of people from the entertainment industry involved. So when I came across this story, I read that David Draymond, the singer from Disturbed, and Gene Simmons from Kiss had signed this open letter.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ.
So yeah, the creatives are all getting together.
Yes, those creatives, those money changers, those scrupulous merchants.
Yeah. So that's what all these people, I saw like one of them interviewed on Sky News about this, saying, I'm a creative. They're designating this title to themselves, and they're saying, I'm being persecuted as a creative. Now, what did they actually do here? So this was a pro-Palestine group, and it identified their names, so they could put a face to a name, and then they also linked social media pages that they post on, so like Facebook accounts, Instagram accounts, that kind of thing. Now, as far as I know, they did not do things like publish where they work or what their phone number is or their address, anything like that. They did not publish those kind of specific details that could say lead you to actually track them down, to locate them. As far as I know,
and
they
people only publish those things for one reason.
Yeah, and I mean,
e.g., Tim Lutz. That's what happens when those things are published.
That's right, of course. And so the fact that they didn't do that showed that to the extent that they were using doxing as a weapon, if you want to put it that way, they weren't doing it to actually cause physical harm to those individuals. No. They did do it as a way of, say, perhaps hurting them professionally or socially or whatever. But, I mean, newspapers do that all the time. We love scandals, don't we? We love scandals and embarrassing stories. Just look at what is happening to Barnaby Joyce right now, okay?
Yeah.
Someone filmed him, and
I love Barnaby Joyce because, like, even though I'm a dysfunctional alcoholic, maybe I still do actually have a future in Australian politics.
Right, but I mean, it certainly wasn't illegal for that guy who filmed him to put that footage out in the public domain. So, yeah, and as it stands right now, anyway, obviously because we're having a conversation about this, what they did was not illegal. It was not. So, if they actually did publish the addresses and things like that, and then someone went and harmed one of those individuals, well, there are incitement laws that you can get people on doing that. Okay, so it's not like the law doesn't touch on that territory. It does. We do have laws in place.
The thing is, like, the anarchists we've dealt with in the past doing this. Example, I brought up the Tim Lutz case. Like, those laws are on the books, but are they ever actually fucking used?
For some people, they are. I mean, I doubt very much.
That's a sticking point. For some people, they are.
Right, and I mean, this is why. Okay, let me read out this quote here, because look, as you can imagine, the Australian Jewish community is very supportive of this announcement by Mark Dreyfus, and so I just wanted to read out this quote from the ECAJ president, Daniel Aguian. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but anyway, he said this. We look forward to working with the government to ensure the full extent of the harm caused is understood and that the new laws effectively protect Australians from this shameful and dangerous practice. So
I think you forgot a hyphen in there.
We look forward to working with the government. Now, why would they need to work with the government when it comes to the drafting of this law? Because they don't want it to apply to them. This obviously is about doxing for thee, but not for me. And we know this because, well, let's think of what was the first large-scale doxing operation that happened in Australia. It was when they released the One Nation members list. Okay, so people who were
10,000 people doxed by a predominantly Jewish group.
It was a Jewish group that did it. Because back then, there were actually... you could say that One Nation was basically a white nationalist party back then. It's not anymore. But back
No.
then, it like pretty much was. And naturally, Jews felt threatened by that. And because of the fact that One Nation went through terrible media coverage back then, I would say it's even worse than what they currently have. And, Pauline Hanson was so villainized by the media that anyone associated with that party would therefore also be tarred with the same brush and dismissed as an awful racist and everything. So the Jewish groups took advantage of that, somehow got a hold of the membership list and leaked it and did the exact same thing. The personal details of the members were revealed. Their identities were made publicly available. Now, I'm not sure if addresses and phone numbers and things like that were released. But does anyone think?
Oh, dude, it was the name, and it was the it was the names, and it was the fucking like late 90s, or was it late 90s or early aughts?
Yeah, it was late 90s.
Late 90s, yeah. Like, congratulations, you could still like pick up basically anyone's name and phone number on the white pages. Also, yellow pages.
Of course, yeah. So back then, yeah, that's all you really needed was their name, and you can just look them up. So it would have been quite easy to be able to track someone down as a result of that. Now, the other thing is that can I remind people what happened about 3 weeks ago when we had around 100 people who tried to celebrate Australia Day, and they took a train to a particular location which they weren't allowed to march in the end, and they were hiding their identities by wearing balaclavas and ski masks and whatnot. Chris Minns, the Premier of New South Wales, came out and said that police do have the power to identify those people who are hiding their identities, that they would be named and shamed in front of friends, families, and co-workers, and they would be exposed as massive racists. So the Premier of New South Wales actually came out and publicly threatened around 100 people with doxing. Now, I would like to ask people like Mark Dreyfus and the ECAJ and Devir Abramovich, etc., how can you say that this is a disgusting, horrible, awful practice, yet at the same time, and in fact only 3 weeks prior to this announcement, you were in full support of Chris Minns doxing around 100 people? Is doxing really that bad, is what I want to know. Or is it only bad when it happens to you?
Well, here's one of the key phrases which I'm seeing like show up in reference to this law, whether it be the ABC's reporting, SBS, etc. Public interest. You can be allowed to be doxxed if it's in the public interest. Now, where have we heard that turn of phrase before?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, our identities are in the public interest, but oh god, Herschel Moishi, planning to, basically fuck with a completely legal pro-Palestinian thing, whatever. No, that's not in the public interest, but hey, my identity is in the public interest. Your identity is in the public interest.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way you can spin it. And what would their argument basically be? Because we think you guys are evil and we're not. So therefore, it's in the public interest to expose evil people, but not good Jews like us.
Well, they'll say that we're dangerous. We're dangerous, and we can do much more damage, which is completely fucking not the fucking case. I wish I had, not really wish, but like I have nowhere near the ability to do personal damage to people than your average community rabbi, or hell, even a participant at your local shul. There's a lot more potential for damage there than there is in my hands.
Right. So look, in terms of, you mentioned those Americans who looked at it and said, this looks like a good thing. Maybe it could actually work. Well, given the nuances we just made there, yeah, I mean, it basically sounds to me like, and also the fact that the ECAJ has said, hey, we're going to be working with the government on this, they are basically going to structure these new laws to make it so that, certain people can get doxxed and other people can't. I'm pretty sure that's what's going to end up happening.
No, of course.
So, and it's the Jewish Attorney General who was drafting those laws as well, I might add.
Yeah, and by the way, the governor who was literally like threatening to dox them, Mins, 3 weeks prior. Well, I'll just say, just look into his family genealogy, and I'll leave it there.
Chris Minns.
Yes.
I've not heard that about Chris Minns.
Luckily, it is still on Wikipedia. Right, at least I hope it is.
Okay, I'd have to look into that. But anyway, I just want to go through. There was a couple of points a friend of ours made when we shared this story in a private chat. I just want to read what he said because he made some good points here. He said, "Does this apply to media attacks on the NSN members?" Right. So he said, "Probably not, as long as they don't give personal contact details." Yeah. So maybe what they'll do is they're going to say that if it's deemed in the public interest, well, you can still publish names and photos and things like that, but maybe just not give the address. Maybe that's it. So that could be a small win, couldn't it? If they end up putting that on the books, that you can't actually publish someone's address. Friendly Geordies would be a bit safer then, So, but yeah, I mean, we've definitely, we know of a lot of people who've been targeted in that way. I mean, one of them I know who's been targeted is Ryan Fletcher, from XYZ.
Yes.
He has had Antifa follow him while he rides a push bike. Ryan has to ride a
and
bike. He can't drive a car. Yeah, and Ryan can't drive a car because of his epilepsy. So, and they know this. So they've been fucking following him with cars, and throwing shit at him on the way to work. I don't hear... I mean, let's compare that to, say, this woman from... this is one of the creatives who was part of this.
Creative.
She's apparently an author, Lee Kaufman. She said, "Since the doxing, my mental health has really fluctuated and it's occupied my headspace. It's been really emotionally distressing, and it's been hard to focus on parenting my small children and do my full-time job as well. I'm not even the most affected person. Some of our members have had far worse consequences, but still I've been affected. For example, some anti-Zionist activists have been harassing the workplace where I teach writing, trying to persuade these workplaces to cancel my workshops." Okay. I'm just straight off there going to say I don't believe you there, but let's say if that is true.
And also, we've had worse. We've had worse.
That's what I mean. Well, just think of what I just explained about Ryan there. Okay, and he's had that as well. He's had people call up and say, "Hey, there's this guy working for you. You need to fire him." But he's also been fucking assaulted and stalked as well. So that hasn't happened.
God, and not even by just just straight up anarchists and etc. I've had mostly the older guys at this point, but I've had some newer guys say that, "Hey, look, I had plainclothes police officers show up to my place of work and said, do you know your bosses? Do you know that you are hiring a Nazi?" Sorry, stumbled over my own words there. "Do you know that you're hiring a Nazi?" And then screaming Nazi, saying this place hires Nazis. And it turns out, either through recognition as, "Hey, this was a detective that tried to get an interview with me 2 or 3 weeks ago," or just some piece of information that came down the line later, that those were actual state police officers.
Yes.
This has happened.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I mean. And look, we all know how good they are at exaggerating all these stories. When she says that anti-Zionists have been pressuring employers to cancel her workshops, I'm sorry, but no, I just do not believe you, honestly. Show me the evidence or I just don't believe you. So,
when that happens to our guys, we give them a pat on the back and just say, "Get over it."
So look, what about the outfits out there whose specialty is doxing? I mean, Slack Bastard, they do some shitty podcast over there that no one listens to. But the reason why Slack Bastard is known is because, well, it's an operation to dox people, and it's basically an open secret that they work hand in hand with the AFP and ASIO to get that stuff out there. And I would say that some of the information they have, they do sit on it. They don't release it all in one go. And maybe now with these laws, it could mean that they would be likely to hold back more information. I don't know. So there might be some silver linings to this in some way. But I don't know. Nolza, you don't seem as optimistic as I do, though. You just think they're
No,
not going to...
even in that instance, they would literally just basically like hand it off to whatever their contact with is in the AFP and just be like, oh yeah, like here's this information. It doesn't necessarily need to be criminal, blah blah blah. But congratulations, give the AFP a name and they'll find a criminal charge.
Yeah. So what about if... How would this actually relate to us? If we were to say... Because look, I published a Doxxing article about 3 years ago, I think, on the roaster.biz. So they call me a massive hypocrite, but I just think so long as they're doing it to us, they're using it as such a powerful weapon against us. And it is the most powerful weapon against us, I would say. I think we're kind of silly to say, okay, well, we're going to be above you and we're not going to resort to such dirty tactics. Well, that basically means you're putting yourself at a further strategic disadvantage. So I say if you can use it and it's legal to use it and they're using it on you, you might as well use it back on them because we have to fight with the tools that are available to us. And anyway, the one I published was on when we had the first vandalism of the Captain Cook statue. There's since been many more. The first time it happened, it caused the most outrage. And ever since, it kind of gets fewer and fewer lines of coverage because, unfortunately...
Oh, yes, that staffer, yeah.
Yeah, so we did call for David Shoebridge, who's a senator now, a Green senator, to sack his one of his staffers. I can't remember her name. She's some Asian tart. But it never happened. And then the other girl was some Fitness First girl as well. I think she might have lost her job. And by the way, the Docs article that David Hiscox wrote on them was so much meaner than mine. Like he called that one at Fitness First a fat whore. And then apparently she did get sacked and then she became a fatter whore. Like she put on a bunch of weight when that happened to her.
God.
But no, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we did that. Now, what we did at the time, we did their names and their social media and where they work. But we didn't publish any, like, emails or phone numbers or certainly didn't publish their addresses or anything like that. So, I don't know, like, would simply just naming and shaming people, would that still kind of be okay? I mean, according to Chris Minns, it's okay. Would that actually be a sort of a loophole in these new laws? What do you think about that?
No, because no, for like the reasons we just went over. Like this law is gonna be chaotic, one way.
It's gonna be
yeah. It is just basically a shield for them and not for us. So imagine for our parties, for our people, no, it's not going to.
So you're saying the only loopholes that'll exist will be for their benefit and not for ours?
Yeah, that they're talking about like journalistic privileges when it comes to this kind of stuff. Yeah, like okay, congratulations. Like well, would David Hiscox be considered a journalist under the legal system of Australia? Would a court in this country like deem him a journalist?
A court wouldn't, even though he is. I mean, he runs
a news site, does writing, does investigative journalism. Hell, has even fucking put feet to street getting stories. That is more of a journalist than your average 7 News, ABC, like 10 News, SBS journalist these days.
Yeah, you just read off an auto cue. So
But again, no, like none of these standards of protection or allowance are going to apply to us.
No. All right, so look, let's wait and see. The year is still young, obviously. I suspect we're going to see these laws pretty soon, though. I mean, as soon as you've got Jewish pressure happening, and what's more, you've actually got a Jewish politician doing it for you, I'd say these laws will come on the books very, very soon, and we will certainly comment on them when they do. All right, well, let's move on. Did you have anything else to say on that issue?
No, that's pretty much it.
Okay, so on to Israel and Gaza. So Penny Wong appeared on 7:30 about a week ago, and she was asked about the Australian government's decision to freeze humanitarian aid funding to UNRWA, the UN body that's responsible for humanitarian aid in Gaza. She was asked if Israel had put the Australian government in the possession of all of the relevant evidence that they were actually hiring Hamas fighters and that current employees of UNRWA were actually directly involved in the October 7 attacks. So when she was asked if she was in possession of that evidence, she said, "No, we're not. We have spoken to the Israelis and we have asked for further evidence." But no, they have not actually received it. She was then asked if an Israeli ambassador had that evidence, and she said she doesn't know. She said he may. I don't know what he has. Now, does this sound like a minister who's actually made an informed decision when she admits that she doesn't have the available evidence and that she doesn't even know if those in the Israeli government that she talks to are in possession of that evidence and can provide it to her?
Sounds like someone who just got told by daddy.
Well, that's what happened, yes. So every time I read another story on this, these claims by Israel that UNRWA is somehow completely enmeshed with the workings of Hamas just seem to wear thinner and thinner all the time.
Well, again, it's a conjecture that is, said to be proven in the moment, and then, the moment passes and then it's just forgotten about.
Yeah. So look, despite all of that, and despite the fact that obviously the freezing of our funding, and not just us, like there were numerous Western countries that made the decision all at the same time, I might add, clearly this is resulting in people dying. We know that the Israelis are going into Rafah, they're going into the south. So basically what they did was they pushed them all down to the south and said, move down here and you'll be safe. And now they're attacking the one area where they were told they would be safe.
Yeah, Rafah, yeah.
So
they've only pulled this like 5 or 6 times during this conflict, haven't they?
Right. And I believe they did a military raid on the last operational hospital in Gaza as well. And they have effectively rendered that hospital useless now too. So they have just destroyed every hospital in Gaza, every last one of them. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. But despite all of this, Wong is still saying that the allegations made by Israel are serious and that they are credible, and that we have to await the investigation that has been carried out here. And, Israel is going to say that the investigation is never going to conclude because they've demanded things like having all of the financial accounts of UNRWA checked by third parties. In other words, by them. They want to go through their finances. Okay? Now, they're never going to be able to conduct an investigation that is that thorough. So it would just keep going in perpetuity. And, and that is what they ultimately want. Which leads to my the next story that we've got here. So these are allegations that are coming from Penny Wong's department, which is Foreign Affairs. And this is showing, again, the tightrope that Labor is trying to walk here. So people in the department are saying that a lot of the attacks made on UNRWA are coming from people with an agenda, obviously, are exaggerated, and are coming from groups who have long been critics of UNRWA, basically because they provide humanitarian aid to Palestinians. So this was a guy, he was the head of the departments, that is Foreign Affairs Department's Middle East Division, who said this. And unfortunately, often these reports can contain a significant amount of exaggeration. So the agenda is, and this is well known, for UNRWA to be disbanded. Yeah. So they've wanted to do this for a very, very long time. And it's part of how they're, conducting the war effort right now. Because you'd have to be a moron or, a neocon to actually think that part of that strategy is not killing civilians. It clearly is. As I said before, they've kind of squeezed everyone from the north into the south of the Strip, and now they're attacking the Strip. They've destroyed every hospital that they had. There's a blockade. They turned off electricity and water and other forms of power to the entire population.
That they rile up their own population to stop fucking humanitarian aid trucks from even getting to the place at all.
Right.
Just truck traffic from getting there.
Right. And the one body that's able to kind of circumvent that blockade is UNRWA. That's it, really.
Well, again, to like understand the greater importance of that to the state of Israel is to understand their actual plans for the people of Gaza. And when I say at worst, people will question me saying, why is this situation I'm about to say at worst? Well, wait until I say the at best. At worst, UNRWA is blocked and the people of Gaza die in the fucking streets in Gaza and they're bulldozed away, packed into a mass grave, and that's that. At best, because there's no humanitarian aid support in the current region that they're in, they're starved out, dehydrated out, and they flee to Europe. Or in the middle, flee to Egypt.
Yeah. They want them just to move out into other Middle Eastern countries or to Western countries, including Australia, of course. Remember,
if there is basic humanitarian aid still available in Gaza, they will still stay in Gaza. They don't actually intend to fucking leave. If they wanted to leave, they could have left decades ago at this point. So, yeah. These people don't want to leave, but if they are forced materially to leave, yeah, guess where they're going to leave? They're going to become our fucking problem. And that's why UNRWA needs to fucking go.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's just part of the main strategy that Israel has at the moment is cause as much damage to Gaza and the civilian population as they possibly can. And so part of that must be to go and get the one body that's able to circumvent the humanitarian blockade, and that's UNRWA. That's it. It's plain and simple. That's what they're doing. Now, who were these groups, though, that have been responsible for all of this exaggeration and having an agenda? Well, one of them is the ECAJ, Executive Council of Australian Jewry. They admitted it. So the chief executive, Alex Ricken, said it was true that his organisation had long had an agenda when it came to UNRWA. And they wanted them to force greater scrutiny of an agency that was riddled with corruption and extremism. He went on, the fact that it took credible reports of UNRWA facilities being used as weapons depots, its supplies being siphoned by Hamas and its employees joining the October 7 attacks for anything to be done is deeply concerning. Whoa, hold on. What do you mean? All of this stuff has not been proven at all, and Penny Wong even admitted that she has not seen the evidence for it. And they just keep repeating this stuff. Like, it's just like they keep repeating all the stuff about disintegrating babies on October 7, shit like that, and raping people to death and that kind of ridiculous shit, breaking pelvis bones. They just keep repeating it, and yeah, if you repeat the lie often enough, people do start to believe it. Okay. All right. So next story. Um, you had ABC executives appear before a Senate committee recently. So this was regarding, a range of topics, but the coverage of the Israel-Gaza conflict was probably the main point of discussion here. So, quick update, they did not really discuss the case of Antoinette Latou's unfair dismissal claim. So we're going to have to wait and see what happened there. Remember, she's the one who got fired for basically having a pro-Palestine view. And
Yep.
and the reason why she was fired was because of a particular WhatsApp group that was ran a letter writing campaign to the ABC. And it wasn't that one we were just talking about, the one with the creatives. It was a lawyers group. All right. Although I wouldn't be surprised if the creatives got in on that letter writing as well.
So we got the creatives and we got the lawyers. So the destructives.
Yes. Okay. So something else that they discussed, however, was that the ABC in the past 4 months or so has received over 3,000 complaints regarding their coverage of the Israel-Gaza war. So it says here that the complaints covered around 1,300 different issues. That sounds like an exaggeration to me. That's like almost half the number of complaints being about an individual issue. But anyway, what it's really about is impartiality and bias. Are they biased towards the Israeli side or the Palestinian side? So, about 58% of those complaints have alleged that they have been pro-Israel or anti-Palestine, and about 41 to 42% have been the opposite. Okay? So, that I think that considering the fact that they've received more allegations of being anti-Israel and pro-Palestine, I think this must show that various Palestinian activist groups are adopting the same strategies here. Because when I first saw this story, I thought, oh, wait, I bet there's more complaints about, being pro-Palestine and not being pro-Israel enough. And the reason I thought that was because of these, WhatsApp groups and other groups that hold these public letter writing campaigns. And, well, they're just campaigns to contact various members of the media and politicians and put forward your case and say, you need to be more pro-Israel. How dare you? You're an anti-Semite. How dare you run this kind of coverage? But no, they're actually outnumbered here. So 58% no, said they're too Israeli and too Palestinian. So I think they're adopting the strategies that Jewish groups use in terms of, harassing the media, harassing politicians, lobbying politicians to get their way.
Oh no! If you've ever gone to a decent argument with an Arab, they can kvetch just as well as a Jew.
Yeah. Oh, they can, yeah. But I would say that, up until recently, I mean, they lacked that sort of organizational structure to kind of, make that kvetching organized, to make it heard, to make it effective. Because if you're just expressing your opinion to your friend, that's not really, that's just going off into a black hole. What they're now saying is, no, don't just get mad and have a fiery conversation with your buddies. Actually contact the ABC or contact your local member of parliament and tell them what you think. And that way you can actually start playing the same game that the Jews do. So I think it's indicative of that. Still, though, 41 to 42%. And Jews make up what percentage of the Australian population? Like 0.2%, something really, really small. There's definitely a lot more Arabs and Muslims in Australia than there are Jews. So it's still disproportionate, isn't it? To have 41, 42%. So it shows that they haven't matched their efforts, but they have powers in numbers. Simply being a bigger group puts them at an advantage.
Even with a less effective percentile rate, yeah. I was going to say, like, if you want to understand why Jews kind of like act monolithically, um, it's simply because like there is no Jew in the Jewish community that doesn't attend at least some Jewish community organizing thing, whether it be shul, whether it be some like fucking like local book reading group, etc. They nearly have 100% community attendance, and it takes very little effort to organize mass instruction while that happens. Now, when it comes to Muslims, you think, oh, they all go to mosque, etc. No, Jesus, ever-loving Christ. Western Muslims are completely and utterly devoid of their actual institutions. Now, they build mosques, yes, they do, and they are culturally intrusive, yes, they are. But have you ever actually looked at the attendance of a mosque?
Can't say I have.
It's very low. I'm not even joking. The reason why they'll bring like white school kids to a mosque as like a religious teaching exercise is because the mosque gets paid for that, because they don't actually get paid by their own fucking flock, I guess.
Well, I mean, the thing is, what is often said about Muslims and Arabs who flee from the Middle East and come to the West is, they're coming here because they have an opportunity to live a more decadent lifestyle.
Yeah.
Which means that they don't really take Islam seriously. And that's why a lot of them end up in organized crime and doing drugs. I mean, just look at, what's happening in Western Sydney is the obvious example. And yeah, I can't imagine those kind of guys like in Fat Pizza going to mosque very often.
No, they don't.
They'll be too hungover for that.
Well, again, like even the guy who did the Lent siege over here
He tried to join the Rebels motorcycle gang.
Yes, he did. And the Pulse nightclub shooter apparently went to the Pulse nightclub like a whole bunch of times over the years before, and etc. Like, there's multiple examples of even like your radical, extremist Muslim mass shooter or terrorist, where previously that they lived an incredibly decadent lifestyle because they were a Western Muslim.
Yeah, that's actually just what when we interviewed Syrian Girl, that's exactly what we were talking about. Was if you look at those guys who end up going to fight ISIS, and they actually fly over to Syria to do all of that. If you look at the earlier photos of them, they're all in like Adidas and Kappa tracksuits and that, and showing off cash and bongs and guns and all that kind of stuff. Trying to imitate the whole American gangster rap look.
Yep.
And then they grow up a bit and they go, "Oh, what was I doing? I was such a bad guy. I need to make up for all of that shit that I was doing." Well, you become a devout Muslim. You actually start taking your religion seriously, and then you say, "I need to go and fight for Allah overseas." So
pretty much,
that happens. All right. Oh, okay. So we've also got somewhat of a war on personalized number plates, saying particular things.
Oh, yeah.
So I did see one that said Zig 88. Someone photographed that and put it up. I would say with stuff like this, when they put it in for approval it is just a licensing center, isn't it? Where you get it done.
DOT.
I mean, I've never had any interest in getting a personalized plate. But it's obviously a case where whoever gave the green light to it just didn't know what these things meant. And yeah, most people are not going to know what Zig 88 means. So in the case here we're talking about, this was a Sydney man who got his plate OCT 7th, October 7th, that is. That was his license plate. So OCT 7TH. So that managed to go under the radar. Chris Minns said that those plates had to have been issued in error, and that he must surrender those plates within 2 business days to avoid the vehicle being deregistered. So
Fuck
there you
off.
go.
That was the anniversary that my dog died. How about that? There's your excuse.
I was going to say, like, okay, I get it. It probably, yeah, this person probably is talking about, the date because of the massacre, but it could be another reason. It could be his anniversary or something, couldn't it? Like, we don't know.
Again, like, oh god, we've created a new sensitive date for the world's most protected class.
All right, so we don't need to go into detail on this next story because Marakiu actually covered this on the Merchant Minute. But
was not expecting that.
No, I wasn't either. I thought, damn it, you might cucked us on that one. So just quickly, Jenny Leong was a New South Wales Greens MP, and some footage emerged of her saying that Jewish community groups extend their tentacles into other grassroots movements to make them pro-Israel, essentially. That's what she was saying. And I mean, we were just talking about the Jewish lobby before and how effective they are at starting grassroots campaigns and infiltrating and lobbying and everything. She was basically just trying to say, well, if we don't control the narrative enough, that means they're going to come in and start controlling the narrative for us. They're going to infiltrate our groups and they're going to start changing the way we operate. And that way we won't actually be executing a real pro-Palestinian message.
What did I say last show? Like, literally, they tied the pro-Palestinian movement to the Aboriginal movement in order to kill it.
Of course, yes. Now, as to the metaphor about tentacles, Jenny Leong said that she was unaware of, the fact that there is like a famous cartoon that shows Jews as an octopus with 8 tentacles reaching into various institutions of power in the West. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe she probably didn't know, I'd say. She probably didn't.
Again, it's one of those instances of a leftist stepping on a landmine that they just didn't know was there.
Right. It's funny when that happens because then the Jewish groups actually catch them out.
Yeah, then they get actually punished. You know where Tash Peterson is now? Like, subsiding after Holocaust statements.
Yeah,
on TikTok, because she's not allowed on any other fucking platform.
Yeah, after she said that like buying Easter eggs causes like a Holocaust. She was talking about the amount of milk that is involved in producing chocolate and stuff.
You don't kill cows for milk.
Yeah, but she was still talking about the way they were treated, and I don't know, because remember she's a vegan, not just a vegetarian. She's a vegan, so you're not allowed.
As someone from a dairy farming family, you don't treat dairy cows badly because that's how you end up with absolute shit milk.
I'm just explaining to the audience who might have forgotten or don't know about what Tash Peterson did.
So you touched on an autism there for me.
Okay, well, yeah, but she did a protest saying that it would be like it's an animal holocaust when you buy Easter products or chocolate. And then she actually made a video responding to Devere Abramovich, saying that she was perfectly justified in using the term Holocaust to describe what was happening to animals. And yeah, ever since then, we just don't hear anything about her anymore. It's like,
no, you don't.
And that was because of the fact that she just didn't know what she was getting herself into. When I watched that video, I think we played it on XYZ Live, actually. I remember just thinking, oh, you have no idea, do you? You have no idea what you're up against here. And you are going to regret putting that video out. But anyway, Jenny Leong's office in New South Wales was actually targeted recently by Jewish protesters. So they turned up outside her office. One guy was wearing a giant red squid costume, and then another person was wearing a blue octopus costume. right? So the protest organizer was Israeli-Australian Ophir Berenbaum, who wore the blue octopus. He joined about 15 other people who sang lines from the Beatles' Octopus's Garden, the one written by Ringo, and displayed signs with messages including Dear Jenny Leong, Jews do belong, and also Octopus is not kosher. Another one said, Jenny, my tentacles are purely for pleasure, nothing nefarious.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ.
That's a very Jewish one, isn't it?
Of course they have to be fucking, yeah. Of course they have to go to there.
Yeah. So, these are Ozraelis, as Avi Yemeni likes to call himself. This actually didn't really make the news except for Australian Jewish news. It was the only place I found this story. Like, I actually tried to see if I could get some background on the protesters and stuff, but there's like not really anything happening. So even though Australian Jewish news are like declaring this a big kind of propaganda victory for them, no one really cared. Because not that many people care about Jenny Leong. All right. Anyway, and, Jenny Leong has since apologized for the comments and all that kind of stuff. I bet she fucking did because, yeah, again, she stepped on a landmine she didn't know was there.
Yeah, if only to be a fly on the wall during that ball-busting session.
Right. Okay, now, there was an article on anti-Semitism and Zionism in the ABC the other day, and they went through polling data in terms of Australian Jews' attitude towards the state of Israel and just the concept of Zionism generally. So, according to the poll, 77% of respondents identified as a Zionist, and 86% of respondents view the existence of Israel as essential for the future of Jewish people. I actually thought those figures would be higher than that, but anyway. If you compare those kind of numbers to America, you will find that fewer American Jews identify as Zionists, or at least that's how they will respond in a poll. Yeah. So what this tells us is that we do tend to get more of the Jignat Jews here, rather than the optics ones. This has been historically pretty consistent, I think. For example, Jews, for the most part in Australia, vote for the coalition. They side on the right side of politics, kind of like what they do in Britain, but not in America. Still, even though, you do have that shift to neoconservatism by a lot of American Jews. And certainly the Jewish intellectual movement, if you want to call it that, has kind of shifted rightward. Looking at someone like Alan Dershowitz is a good example of that, someone who moved from being a liberal to more of a neoconservative. The general population of American Jews still votes Democrat, though. So in Australia, we've got a bit of a more kind of hardline nationalist type of Jew to deal with, which was interesting. So we still have that to contend with. And I think that is part of the reason why the Jewish response to the current conflict has been pretty extreme, has been bloodthirsty, perhaps more than what is going on in America right now. Ignoring what Ben Shapiro and Dennis Prager have been saying, where, Ben Shapiro said that he was in favor of wildly disproportionate responses, which I guess he's getting, isn't he? Okay. Oh, God. So the federal government apologized to ASIO director Mike Burgess, who's our best friend, of course, after a confidential briefing to a Labor MP. So this is where Mike Burgess described pro-Palestinian rallies as pressure releases. And this conversation was disclosed to a local MP. It was disclosed by a local MP. So this was to do with the various protests that have spilled out onto the streets. They're sort of dying down now, of course. But
Yeah.
Mike Burgess was basically saying that we should leave these protesters to do what they do because it's a pressure release. It lets them blow off a bit of steam. So his logic was essentially, look, if you let them do this, they're going to be less likely to act out violently or, act out in a
There's
more
also
obscene or obnoxious way.
I definitely imagine that's true for that population as well. Well, fucking just because what we've seen in the fucking UK and London, etc. But I'd say that like there's another take to give to that as well, which is like, hey, look, protesting is ineffective. We're not really going to fucking change shit because of it. And you guys give us the money, which actually does the fucking change in this country. So, yeah, just, let them stamp around, tie themselves out, have their little, proverbial tantrum. And we'll just keep listening to you guys.
Yeah, essentially. So what was it that was disclosed exactly here? So in December last year, you had Higgins Labour MP Michelle Amanda Raja. She wrote to a Jewish constituent who had concerns about Melbourne's weekly pro-Palestine rallies. So in that letter to this Jewish constituent, she said, on the matter of protests, the Director General of ASIO, Mike Burgess, advised me that these pro-Palestine rallies serve as a pressure release, which is valuable given the real risk of a domestic terror attack. So this was confidential information, a briefing that was given to her in private, and then she went and told a Jew about it.
Big mistake.
Yes. So that was her way of saying, hey, listen, we want to act in your best interests. And we actually think that there is less chance of violence and less chance of a terror attack even being carried out if you simply let them get out there and protest. So you can see the logic in it, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is actual fucking stratagem, to be honest. It is statecraft. But congratulations, one of your fucking little toadies just basically told the most neurotic population in the entire world something that would definitely trigger a fucking neuroses event.
Yeah, but I mean, she probably felt compelled to. I mean, because this kind of pressure from various Jewish constituents would be pretty damn high.
Yeah.
And you've got to try and convince them that you've got this situation under control. And so if that includes naming authority figures like Mike Burgess, even though you're not supposed to reveal confidential briefings to members of the public, well, if you have enough pressure on you, you might as well just do it. And that's what she's done here. And I somehow doubt this would be the first time that's happened.
Oh, no. No, again, look, this is... Imagine putting yourselves in the shoes of this member. You're in a completely no-win situation. Either you say nothing to this, incredibly influential and protected class, and or you lie and say oh yeah, we're pursuing other methods, blah blah blah. You're gonna either get voted out, fucking next fucking election, or you actually say hey, look, I've got this information. We were actually doing there was actually a stratagem here at play, and you end up in this situation.
Yep, and that's what happened. So the protests have died down a bit anyway, so I guess she doesn't have to worry so much. I mean, they might start to because of what's happening in Rafah now, it all depends on how much worse the humanitarian situation gets.
How much more bloody?
I believe the kill count is 27,000 people. If there's a sudden spike, there'll be more of these protests. But yeah, in terms of the rise of anti-Semitism and everything, I think it's just that it's more visible now. That's all. And this conflict has pushed a lot of people to speak up. And a lot of these old attitudes that people may have had towards Jews are simply being aired now. They didn't just suddenly come out of thin air. They didn't come out of nowhere. They were there. They were always there. And now we just hear about it a little bit more. And Jews are going absolutely fucking crazy over that.
Well, yeah. Again, like they've seen what they've created on the left with these, like, you know, status seeking populations, saying like, oh yes, you know, protecting brown people even overseas is, you know, something that gives you status. Unfortunately, being pro-Palestine has allowed for at least somewhat of a pathway to status. And, well, they've seen their imported hordes actually turn against them for ethnic reasons.
Right. All right. So let's talk about immigration. Did you see the latest boat arrival, Nosey?
Oh, yes. A little bit north of Broome. I'm actually kind of surprised that they didn't actually get immediately assaulted up there.
Well, yeah, because they actually landed at Beagle Bay, which is like 90% Aboriginal.
Yeah. Well, maybe they had a look at those Pakistani, Bangladeshi men and were like, oh, no, bro, that's my cousin.
They might have thought that, yeah. And they were all really intrigued, you know, to see this rickety boat suddenly come up to shore. Eagle Bay.
We're reuniting families here.
This is in the northwest, like way north of Western Australia. And it was originally reported it was 30 men. The last count I saw was 24. So these are people from Pakistan who apparently had escaped Pakistan before, but were deported back there. And they were facing torture. At least that's what they were saying. One of the men spoke a bit of English, and that was the story he was relaying to, like, you know, the people who found them. But it was actually the local, like the white people in the community that helped them out, like took them back to their houses and gave them a meal and got them a shower and things like that. Which is, no, don't do that, guys. Talk about pathological.
Too nice for our own good.
Yeah, don't be nice to them. They shouldn't be here. So naturally, Peter Dutton is out there talking about how the boats haven't stopped under Labor. And whenever Labor gets into power, the boats always end up starting up again.
And he should shut the fuck up.
Well, look, they're putting a lot of pressure on Andrew Giles, who, like the Australian newspaper, he's the immigration minister, by the way, as saying that his appointment as immigration minister was basically a captain's pick by Anthony Albanese because he's a factional ally and a personal friend of his. And they were saying that there were a lot more kind of obvious names that could have been chosen for the immigration portfolio than Adam Giles. And now what we're seeing with the failure to stop the boats, and also what happened with ankle bracelets and whatnot, or those people released from indefinite detention, that Adam Giles should be sacked. And there's even rumblings right now about Albo doing a ministerial reshuffle, which is how you sack a minister, basically.
Yes.
You know, you just reshuffle the front bench.
I'll say this, like, the opposition has nothing to say, simply for the fact that even those people that were released, and when I say he should shut up, this is what I mean. Even the people who were released, quote unquote, meant to be with ankle bracelets, turns out, no, they weren't going to get ankle bracelets because of, you know, legal matters. They were allowed to stay in detention under his watch. It's fucking terrible. But no, it's one of the things that, like, here's another thing. Did the boats actually stop under John Howard?
Yeah, well, they stopped under Tony Abbott as well. But look, this is 24 people. I cannot get very animated about 24 packies turning up in a boat.
Go to your local airport.
Yeah. And there's way more of them coming illegally by plane. That actually accelerated under the Abbott government. It has accelerated basically under every government because it's just a general trend and they don't do anything to stop it. All we actually do is simply just make it easier for them to migrate here legally with free trade agreements and visa arrangements, which is why we're getting so many bloody Pajeets and Pakis at the moment. And that's the problem when Peter Dutton talks so tough on stuff like this and says the minister should be sacked and all this. But he does not actually narrow in on the important issues. Because this is a blip on the screen. It's a drop in the ocean. I don't really give a shit about it. I don't care. I mean, I don't want them here, and I hope they get sent back. Albo has actually said that their policy remains that if you come to Australia by boat, you will not be resettled here. So, who knows?
Maybe next time I see the guys, I will show them the replies to a property listing that my family has made, and I'll show you the last names of the people replying to that property listing. Trust me, none of them sound vaguely European or Anglo-Saxon. In fact, the vast majority had the last name Patel.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, let's now talk about those people who were released from indefinite detention. So I believe that the final kind of count that they have on this is 149. At the beginning, I'm pretty sure they said it was like around 80 people, and that count just kept getting bigger and bigger. So we've got some numbers.
152. You got a bigger number that's a bit later?
149 was the biggest one I saw.
Okay, 152. So I got the bigger one. That was from ABC Shorts on Friday.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, if the ABC is admitting that, then yeah, it's probably true. Anyway, some numbers we have in terms of just who these people are and what they've done. So this is out of the 149, going by this count. 7 murderers, 36 sex offenders. 37 sex offenders, and that includes pedophiles. 24 of those freed have since reoffended, and 36 have been exempted from wearing ankle bracelets. Okay, so this is a more serious one. More serious than 24 random packies just kind of turning up, because these people are extremely dangerous and violent, and a lot of them are sex offenders going after children.
Yes.
So, and we knew this stuff about these people, which is why they're in indefinite detention. We covered last week that there were multiple lawsuits going to be filed or were filed against the Australian government regarding the wearing of ankle bracelets. So, all of those exemptions, note it said 36 people had been exempted from wearing ankle bracelets. Labor made those exemptions so that they could kill off that court challenge, even though some of those people have committed horrific crimes. So I was going to say the court system has been pretty poor in this regard. They've been far too lenient to those people, and they have created an incentive structure to go and just simply sue the government. And considering the fact that the government capitulated in that regard, that sets a very bad precedent, which is like, okay, you can just threaten the government with a lawsuit and they'll back down. And they won't do things like make you wear an ankle bracelet. So as a result of all this is part of why, the Australian says that a cabinet reshuffle is imminent. Or,
not because of the outcomes, because it's a PR nightmare.
Right. As to whether Andrew Giles is actually like an incompetent minister, well, I just think that the government at large was caught off guard when the court made that decision. And this is actually our next story here. So there was a warning from High Court Judge Jacqueline Gleeson last year in June to say that Labor had failed to sufficiently prepare for a likely loss in the case that eventually rendered indefinite detention illegal. So we all know that when this decision was made, Labor had to all of a sudden rush these new laws through to increase security measures on all those people who were released. Why did they not have draft legislation at the ready, so that if the decision did end up going that way, going against the government, well, they could immediately just pass those laws instead of having to rush everything through? Well, now it looks like it was even worse than that, because they were given legal advice saying that it would actually be likely that they would lose that case. Well, that looks even worse for Andrew Giles. I bet. He had a bad week in Parliament as well. So he actually struggled to tell the Parliament whether Labor was aware of the locations of the freed detainees, whether or not they were being monitored, which individuals were not wearing ankle bracelets, and why. So he had a shocker. He's not quite as bad as Linda Burney, who just has to read off a script all the time, but he's pretty bad.
God damn, imagine being like worse than a fucking pre-programmed politician.
Yeah. However, let's take the pressure off him slightly here. So, this legal advice was actually handed over to the Office of the Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, our best friend. It was briefed after June Directions hearing on the matter, the NZYQ, that's what the case is known as, matter in which Justin Gleeson identified problems with the Commonwealth case. So yeah, she actually went through and said, all right, you've got this, and this wrong with your legal arguments. And as a result, you could well be defeated in the High Court. That information was given to the Attorney General's office in June of last year. And still, Labor did not come up with any draft legislation at the ready to pass in the event that they would lose. Yeah, that looks bad. But it looks bad for the whole government. It looks bad for the Department of the Attorney General and Mark Dreyfus, not just for Andrew Giles.
You'd kind of fucking hope it does at this point. After all this, after like the fucking stories we covered last week, you would just not for genuine connection between point A and point B when it comes to those two things, but you would just hope that there was something even as symbolic and useless as that coming down the line.
Right. Now, I'm sorry, just to end this section on yet another black pill. Andrew Giles has actually used his powers of ministerial intervention to allow a Vietnamese family to stay in Australia. This, of course...
Quang O Tran.
Hmm?
Quang O Tran, what's their last name?
Tran, the Tran family.
There we go.
Yeah.
It's one of five.
Or they call it like Nguyen. Isn't that the other really common?
Quang, Tran, Nguyen, an impronounceable one that starts with a B, but they don't pronounce as a B, and a Quinn.
Okay.
Yep. That's their 5 last names.
Yeah, so I think they're like restaurant owners. That's just what Vietnamese people do, don't they? They all just come here and open up a Vietnamese restaurant.
And then sell heroin, but yeah.
Yeah, that too. Well, I mean, to be fair, I don't think that problem is anywhere near as bad as what it used to be.
Oh, fuck no. No, no,
Remember
no.
when Vietnamese selling heroin was the big problem?
Well, it's
We
the
go
same
back to
thing with like the fucking like the various mafias of America. They just figured out they could make more money being legitimate.
right. So at least they've done that. I still don't want them here,
No,
but this probably is, in all fairness, a family that won't be a drain on the Australian economy. But just to point out, this was another family that had a free public relations campaign fought for them through the ABC and other pieces of media, saying, hey, look, see, this hardworking family owning a business and everything like that. They just want to stay. And they went through a long time of having permanent visas rejected. And then Andrew Giles steps in and says, oh, well, okay, you can stay. Why? Because I said so. Because ministerial powers allow him to do that.
oh God, like let's get some South African families in front of him. Surely he'll act the same.
All right. So we're going to move on to foreign students. And we may or may not have a white pill for you here. I'm not sure. I'll read out the details and people can decide for themselves here. But it concerns foreign students. Now, it looks like Labor has actually sought to crack down on exploitation in the education sector. And this is part of the strategy to reduce net migration to the country by 50% in 2 years' time. So by the end of 2025. I don't think they're going to get there. That's my personal assessment.
They
But
never
anyway,
do.
apparently in the last month, the number of international student arrivals in Australia has been slashed by 24%. Now, this is actually not to do with, say, reducing the number who was allowed in, like reducing the cap and queue or anything like that. It's actually just two factors. One is they have a very slow processing ability, and that's just because they don't have enough staff. They're struggling to hire enough people. But the other reason is those who didn't quite meet the genuine temporary entrant requirement are pushed to the back of the queue. Now, these are people who want to do more than just study in Australia. Most of them want to work, and they want to stay in Australia permanently. But the way it is at the moment, though, you're supposed to show that you're a genuine temporary entrant and that you only want to study your course in Australia. And once you finish your course, you will go back to your home country. That's what you're supposed to do. So apparently what they've done is whenever they encounter an application where they don't think it quite gets there, or it's a bit iffy as to whether or not they're a genuine temporary entrant, well, they take that application and they push it to the back of the queue. And that has helped just kind of slow down the process as well. Now, as to whether or not this is going to translate into an overall, like a significant net immigration cut, well, I don't know. I got to. Well, no, I'm going to say probably not. Or if it is, it'll be insignificant. If there's a cut, it'll be.
I actually, got the quote unquote joy of speaking to a university administrator a few days ago, and it turns out that, at least from last year, they had students saying that they were coming in on like large money, etc. Like they could pay their own way, and they're not working and whatnot. And it turns out they were just working for like small businesses, cash businesses owned by, again, Pajeets and Patels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, remember the other policy that we read out, I think, 2 weeks ago? It was that Labor was actually planning to abolish the genuine temporary entrant test. Okay. So at the moment, okay, fine. You've got maybe more of them being rejected or pushed to the back of the queue or whatever. But what if Labor actually just completely abolishes this? Because they did say they were going to. That was the plan. They were talking about it anyway. It may not be set in stone. But as soon as you do that, you're naturally going to get more students coming in. They're like, oh, I don't have to prove this stuff anymore. I can just simply get in, even if I just want to work. Student visa is just a way to get your foot in the door and to get into Australia.
We're no longer dealing with the Chinese upper middle class at this point. We're dealing with the entire tide of India.
Right. I mean, if we just had like a 5% Asian population, like Northeast Asian, Chinese, Koreans, etc., I'm not sure if I'd even be a white nationalist. You know, if it was just like 5% and that was it. And the odd Aboriginal harassing you in the city or something, that'd be Australia I'd be fine with. But it's not like that. And
no,
I don't know how people stay optimistic because now it doesn't matter like where I go, I see diversity. It's just everywhere. And it just angers me every time I see it. There was a time when it was only like certain shopping centres or whatever where I'd feel overwhelmed by that. Now it's just everywhere. It doesn't matter where I go.
Yeah, you can
closing around me.
It's depressing.
So
again, audience, do not come here for good news.
Well, no, hold on. So we might actually have one other white pill here. So something else regarding student visas is that universities are actually currently lobbying the government to speed up the processing of these visas. So they're saying that it's going to be an enormous loss to the Australian economy. But also, apparently so far, if the numbers keep going the way they are, that is, big education is set to lose $310 million worth of student fees. So you can tell why they are not happy about that. But hey, it's a $40 billion a year industry. 310 mil, probably not all that much to them, to be honest. But still, they're out there complaining about this. Now, one last thing before we leave this story is just remember, students do not make the majority of visas that are handed out.
No.
The vast majority are actually just visitor visas, 600 visas. And then, take your pick as to what you want after that. People will go on work visas, on partner visas, on a whole range of stuff. So even if you did have this cut, if we were to believe these figures of 24% of international student arrivals, that's like one small component. We've got to actually expand it and look around. Okay. So Julian Assange, he's still alive.
Somehow.
There was a motion in Parliament calling for his return to Australia. Sometimes people forget he is an Aussie. And it looks like there is one last, I don't know if I can believe this or not, because I swear they say this every time, that whenever there's like another appeal against his extradition to America to face espionage charges, it always seems like they end up scoring another one later on. But apparently, the appeal that is coming up very soon, in fact, it might have already started, is going to be the very last one that he ever gets. And if he loses this one, well, he has to go back to America. So the Australian government has actually voted in favour of a motion to have him come back to Australia. And remember, he has actually attracted support from both sides of politics. Like Barnaby Joyce he went to America, part of that group that was rallying outside the White House, I believe, saying that the charges against him should be blocked. Yeah, I mean, look, I think the guy's been punished enough, considering he was basically in jail before inside that embassy. Before that, he was under house arrest in a mansion. That wouldn't have been too bad, would it? To be holed up in a mansion. but he's effectively been
You do start to
incarcerated
go
for
insane.
10 years. You would after a while, yeah, but jail cell or a mansion? I'm definitely gonna choose a mansion.
Hey, I'm just gonna. If I ever go to jail in America, I'm just gonna have to say that like I can only eat a Jewish kosher diet.
Well, I'm not actually like such a big fan of Julian Assange for like a range of reasons, but one is like if you looked at the WikiLeaks party that did exist for a very short time in Australia, they basically
Incredibly
just
gay.
huh?
Oh no, like incredibly gay.
They were. Well, it was basically the policies of the Greens plus stuff on internet privacy and rights online. That kind of stuff, Kim.com type of stuff.
Yeah,
That's it.
the
That's all it
incredible
was.
like the libertard kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Again, like those people who came to that scene because they hated fucking Globo Homo, and there's people that came to the scene because they hated Globo Homo targeting brown people.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk a bit about the economy. Quick story to kick it off. Good old Bob Catter. He tried to buy his lunch in federal parliament recently, and he tried to pay for it with cash. He was told he cannot do that. So now in Parliament, they are not accepting cash at all. So he made a bit of a deal about that. And I would say that's pretty symbolic. If they're actually banning it at
Yeah,
Parliament House, that would certainly suggest that
it's an elite opinion.
it's yes, and that they plan to expand it to the rest of the country. I mean, a lot of businesses are kind of doing it themselves, and they will actually name environmental reasons and stuff sometimes.
Oh God.
Yeah, they do. Well, I mean, it's made of plastic, isn't it? Our stuff is. Okay. Now, the unemployment rate has gone to 4.1%. Now, this was the last kind of economic metric that Labor were able to brag about, you know? So, interest rates going up, inflation going right up, petrol prices going up, housing prices, etc. But they could still talk about an unemployment rate with a 3 in front of it. Well, no longer. So the last count in December from 3.9% has increased to 4.1%. Fewer jobs are being created. There are fewer jobs being advertised online. And, just anecdotally, I've heard about, say, people going for new jobs and there being a lot of applicants for that one job. Whereas, a year ago, you go for a job and you'd be the only applicant. So that is changing now. And that is the very last piece of the economic puzzle for Labor where, they actually had something. They actually could brag about it a little bit. And they can't do the, it's the Liberal Party's fault anymore.
Because they're
They can't really do that.
functioning a full term.
Yeah, because they've almost served a full term. Well, they served 2 years. Well, I'm sure that obviously the economic policies of the past are still having an impact, but that's not really the way the voters are going to see it, and you're not going to be able to shift the blame to that extent. So, yeah, I've said before that in the lead up to the next election, you're going to have every single indicator in the economy in negative territory, whether it's high prices or high inflation rate or high unemployment or whatever it is. Everything is actually just going to look bad. And it always looks bad for Labor the most because, that's just the reputation that they have. And the coalition say, see, we told you, Labor can't manage the economy. They simply can't manage the economy. That's what you get.
We're back to season 2 of the adult puppet show.
All right. So, apprenticeships and trainee numbers have actually plunged by more than 50,000. And that was just in Anthony Albanese's first year in office. So this has come ever since they introduced fee-free TAFE programs to upskill workers. So, various trades and that where it's been deemed that there's a skills shortage in that area, you would be able to go and do a TAFE course for free. So considering the numbers have plunged by 50,000, that obviously shows that this strategy is not working all that much.
No.
And that is just going to continue the pressure to import skilled workers to make up for those skills shortages.
Oh, yes. I would absolutely love a carpenter from a country where they don't actually fucking do our standard gusset joints. I would love an electrician from a country that doesn't actually understand our fucking internal workings or our voltage. Yes, that will solve our problems. No, to add on top of that, I've actually spoken to some like apprentices, both of carpentry and an electrician carpenter. Electrician apprentice. Jesus Christ, I'm just muddling stuff together. My face is burning. Sorry for the audience. I was working at a pool earlier today, and the pH was very low. But they do not believe that they can actually sustain themselves being an apprentice while learning their trade.
Right.
And that's because their boss can't, and that's because the industry can't. We've harped on about this. The construction industry is going to shit over here. So why do you think, getting people into trades during a massive construction downturn would be a good idea?
Yeah, but doesn't that also kind of suggest that there's not really a skills shortage because those jobs just don't exist?
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah, when all of the building companies are going bust, it's obviously they're not going to be generating those kind of jobs, and they're just.
It's the prime directive of the Australian government to flood every single industry with the tapestry of humanity.
Yeah, and that would partly account for the unemployment rate going further up. Oh, I forgot to say, the underemployment rate has gone up as well. I'm sorry, I don't have those figures, but the increase, in people who say that they want more hours at work but don't get them, that is going up as well. So, wow.
Again, because people can't pay people.
Yeah.
That's it.
Albo may be a one-term prime minister. I really do believe that's possible for him. Okay.
So we were basically calling that during the election.
Yeah. So talking about industrial relations. So these new laws are the right to disconnect, that is the right not to answer phone calls, emails, etc., from your work outside of hours. Peter Dutton is saying that he will tear those laws up. So he basically agrees with the Chamber of Commerce, who say that this is a threat to workplace flexibility. And when they talk about it in that way, they always talk about it in terms of encroaching on the freedom and independence of the worker, of the employee, rather than what it means for the employer. They make it out as if they're the worker's best friend, and they're really actually looking out for their interests. Saying some people like that kind of flexibility to be fucking called at ludicrous hours to get certain work done, because then that means they can just make up for it somewhere else. Maybe they can take the morning off work or something. I doubt it.
Fuck off.
I very much doubt it, guys.
No, if you were contacting a worker after hours, it should be at least compensated for, and it should not be during erroneous hours. Again, like last time we talked about this, I mentioned an example. I was not paid for that, and that should be, well, it shouldn't be illegal, and obviously the Greens fucking fucked it up, I guess. Or at least the ABC was the Greens saying they fucked it up by making it synonymous with a prison term. No, not like prison, just give them a fucking fine for doing it. That's it.
Yeah, well, they're saying that not only could you take it to the Fair Work Commission, but you could even have, a fine meted out to the employer for having done that.
Again,
I
like
don't see anything wrong with that.
it's on par with like what the employer is trying to. The employer is trying to extract money from you for doing that. So there should be compensation to you and maybe a fine to pay for that.
Right.
Yep, that's it. This law would be like really open and closed if it wasn't for the absolute retardation that is our fucking parliamentarian system.
Yes, that's right. Well, anyway, it looks like they're going to get those laws through. They'll obviously get it through the lower house, but they have secured the support of David Pocock now. So, and they probably got the support of the Greens as well, because the Greens were the originators of that idea of the right to disconnect. So, it looks like we will get those through. Now, the CFMEU says that one worker has died and more than 20 other workers have been hospitalized since Christmas due to heat-related illness and injury. And heat stress on a work site, especially if you're doing physical labor out in the sun or in a, say, in a mine somewhere where, you can get up to 50 degrees or whatever it is, can get to ridiculously hot temperatures. I mean, there is always lingering over your head the very possibility that you could just simply die. That does happen.
Yeah.
So there has been one that happened. And, I mean, I was just talking about the heat wave, the never-ending bloody heat wave we were having in Perth right now. I don't know how, honestly, like, construction workers do it, man. These, 42, 43-degree days, you should not be out working in the sun under those kind of conditions. And in fact, when the CFMEU signs their enterprise bargaining agreements with employers, one of the provisions in it, or one of the clauses, is that when the temperature goes to 37.5, the site is actually shut down. Everyone goes home. So,
oh no, coming up to Christmas, I was working on a site and it hit 40 degrees Celsius over here. And there was water boiling off of the little belt that I was actually had around my waist, and I was sweating bullets, and it was bad. It was genuinely bad. I know what heat stroke is like because one instance back in the day that I did actually pass out from heat stroke, but I was goddamn close to that.
Yeah, look, I've worked as a laborer before. I've had blue collar jobs myself, and it is fucking horrible, man. It was absolutely horrible. And when you get home, like for me anyway, all I wanted to do was just fucking crash out. I was like, I've had enough. I just want to go to sleep.
And you can't even do that. You can't even just go and lay down. You have to go and actually cool yourself down, have a cold shower or something. Otherwise, you do brain damage to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, but employer groups are basically saying stop whinging. They've always been against clauses like that written into contracts where at a certain temperature or under certain conditions, work needs to be called off for the day or temporarily, whatever it might be. And no, when their members are actually out there literally dying, that's a sign that you do have to take it seriously. All right. So, what are your views on negative gearing, Nolsey? Do you think we need to reform this practice when it comes to the housing market?
I don't even. How many times has negative gearing been remarketed as something else?
It's just been brought up. I mean, it wasn't an issue at the last election because Labor had given up on that. Remember, Bill Shorten went to the 2019 election, just calling for modest changes, I believe, to negative gearing and a franking credits. But it's been brought up again now because they're saying that it doesn't incentivize enough new housing being built. It just encourages people to invest in existing housing. I'm not an expert in this field, obviously, but they're saying that if we do reform negative gearing in some way, it could go some way into alleviating the housing crisis and putting down rent prices, house prices, etc.
Like I get it for the, like in its original definition for getting rid of like this concept of slumlordism from the housing economy, or like basically like bulk financial purchasing of existing housing. I get it there. Maybe that's a good idea, but what in the ever loving fuck has this been turned into when it comes to our own, like, our own statements by our own government, or our own, like, terminology produced by our own government? Because I just looked it up again, and I remember one example of it, which is like, oh, okay, well, they'll dissuade the idea of, like, taking out a loan to basically buy a rental property. Okay, that's more or less fine. But what in the hell is the rest of this when it comes to, like, like a higher tax rate on trying to tax debt on a property, or like trying to like overtax income on property?
Yeah.
Why do they have to go and make this so fucking retarded?
Sorry, are you able to? I've got a general idea of what it is, but are you able to, like, kind of break down what negative gearing is, especially to our American audiences?
Okay, so the idea of negative gearing is dissuading the idea of, or dissuading the process of making finance on a income producing property. That was the original definition. I'm now looking at 5 different definitions. It's like anti-slumlordism, basically.
Right.
You don't have the money for the property. You don't really own the property, but you're making income on the property, charging a higher rent to pay back your finance on the property.
Yes. And that you can see there how that does not incentivize the building of new houses.
No.
It just encourages you to buy existing property and exploit it.
Well, yeah, like it's like that one Jewish guy in New York that owns like fucking 5 apartment buildings. Doesn't really own them, but in the New York case, he got a good loan from his cousin. But the idea is like to try and get rid of that, and that was, well, this is all spurned on for something that happened in the mid 90s over here, where we had Lebanese gangs basically like financing properties and charging exorbitant rents because they bought up the entire area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So look, the Greens are calling for a reform to negative gearing, which I don't know. I don't see why it would be such an unpopular thing. I mean, most people don't use it. This is really something for investors who don't make up a terrible amount of the population. But this is to do with Labor's Help to Buy housing scheme, which we've talked about a bit. That's basically where you can go and buy a house with only a 2% deposit, and then the government helps you out with the rest. And the government becomes a co-owner of that house because they're helping you out. So according to the Greens, that is a scheme that will only help about 0.2% of eligible home buyers each year. And that it would also have the effect of pushing house prices up. So even though it might help some people who otherwise would not have been able to own a house to own a house, it would still mean a general rise in the price of housing. So they're saying, well, look, not only do we need a better scheme than that, we want you to reform negative gearing at the same time, so that, yeah, people aren't just profiting off of these existing properties. And yeah, and by the way, it's not just something like on the left. Joe Hockey, the former Liberal treasurer, also talked about the exact same thing, about how it simply just incentivizes the exploitation of existing property. So yeah, it's not just the greenies who are talking about that. All right, so some data out of New South Wales shows that homelessness has gone up. So the amount of people who are seeking help to get off the street is shot up. So this report found that the median wait time for accessing housing, social housing, is up to 5 years. So people who maybe could afford to get into a subsidized house are on a waiting list. And because they can't get into, they don't have enough money to get into a standard rental property, well, they're sleeping in their car, or worse still, sleeping on the streets.
Have you actually ever been to just a little bit north of Nedlands these days? There's big parking lots around like it's kind of like open strip malls there.
Not lately, but I have been there.
Yeah, I was gonna say go there now. You'll actually see like families sleeping in their cars there now.
Yeah, you see it in Freo. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people who are just camping out on the Esplanade and stuff. So, oh yeah, it's happening. And I mean, I do remember, it's been a long time, but last time I went to Sydney, I do remember actually being struck by how much more homeless people they had than here in Perth. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see now just how bad it's going.
Hey, we
But yeah,
talked about the mortgage bomb, guys. We warned you months ago.
but I mean, every time you read about the rate of homelessness going up, that's always just an indicator that housing generally is in short supply. It's not just people who have to sleep on the streets. It's just, generally speaking, there is less housing than what we need, and rent is too high, and house prices are too high.
I'm seeing a disturbing number of children.
What, sleeping in cars and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I've never really seen that. I've only really kind of seen, it's mainly just old men, sometimes the odd woman.
Oh no, they again for safety's sake, you're not going to see the children wandering around with them.
Oh, right. Well, they're just by
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, no, the children will stay with the car.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's something that I've noticed heavily since I got back was like I had to go through those areas a little bit, and I was just like, oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of children sleeping in a car, and
Well,
yeah,
man,
like fucking
when I
mum
see like
passed out in the
homeless
front
people,
seat.
like there's these like two homeless people. They're always outside. The Belgian beer cafe.
Oh yeah,
There's these two fucking bums who hang out there, and they've got like little trolleys with them, and they've got two like little terrier dogs. And I feel so sorry for those dogs living with these fucking destitute bums. So I can't imagine what it's like to be a child, like stuck in that kind of shit. That must be just fucking awful.
no, don't worry, they're the future.
So anyway, Anthony Albanese still has a plan to build 1.2 million houses in 5 years. Now, apparently, we've got a new report on this saying that with the current rate of building those houses, they're on track to be short by 200,000. Unless
Yeah,
they implement some radical policy reform, they're saying that they might build 1 million, but definitely not 1.2 million. I'm going to say it's probably going to be much less than that. That report sounds like it's a little bit generous to Albo, because the construction industry is only further slowing down. Okay, we still have more companies that are going to go bust and are not going to be able to build these houses, and those jobs are not going to be there to build those houses. So I think that's a generous number that they've given here. And also in terms of the radical reform, I'd say there's only one radical reform you can make, and that's actually on immigration. Okay,
that's it.
don't worry about TAFE apprenticeships or getting more people into trades. or even, I don't know, writing off loans to building companies or something like that. All of those things are going to be Band-Aid solutions that might make a tiny, tiny difference in the short term. But will you actually meet that number in 5 years' time without heavily reducing the rate of immigration? Hell no. It won't happen.
No, there was some exchange going on today, with some politician. His name is actually not fucking important at this point. But they're saying like, "Oh, I'm here to talk about policy that would allow for the building of more houses." And then, like I guess one of his constituents is saying like, "Oh, like, can we talk about immigration, to this area?" It's like, no, I want to talk about building more houses. And it boils down to this idea. It's like, what is easier? Getting a fucking stub for a plane ticket and coming over here, or putting down the brick and mortar for a fucking house?
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's where we are as a country.
Yep. Sad. All right.
But true.
Okay, let's move on to Aboriginal groups here. Now, we're still sort of processing the findings of the Closing the Gap report that was recently released. It found that I think it was only 5 indicators were showing improvement in terms of closing the gap between Indigenous Australians and non-Indigenous. But at the same time, 5 measures were going backwards as well. So it all just kind of evens out and shows that there's no overall improvement in closing the gap. But something that has gotten worse is the level of suicides. So in 2022, suicide accounted for 4.6% of all deaths of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, compared to 1.6% for non-Indigenous. Suicide was the leading cause of death for First Nations people aged 15 to 44. So yeah, that was one of the targets set in Closing the Gap plan, but that is one of them that has actually gone backwards. So yeah, it's sad. I don't wish anyone to have such a bad life that they want to end it. But again, I would just say that even the current proposals, even the recommendations that are put down when a report like this comes out, are not going to work. You need to take away all the vice. You need to take away the petrol, the booze, the drugs, the smokes, the paint, the porn, all of these things. Like, often they're vices that like most populations can kind of handle, or at least they only cause minor problems. They cause nothing but fucking chaos in these Aboriginal communities.
Well, again, this entire like Aboriginal question comes down to 2 things. Are you willing to expose them to the modern world and have this brutal succession of deaths, suicides, abuse, etc.? Or are we just going to make a nature preserve for them?
Right.
Yeah, and there's no liberal answer to that question.
No. Funnily enough, if you take the advice of white nationalists, I believe that the lives of Aboriginal people would improve. I really do believe that. We still should have separation between us. And their existence would still be pretty hard, I would say, but it would be better. It would be better.
It'd be on their own terms.
It would, and they just wouldn't have access to all of those things that cause them so much harm. All right, so talking about the future of reconciliation in a post-voice referendum Australia, Labor has basically said that in terms of treaty, one of the 3 pillars, voice, treaty, truth-telling, they're saying that they're going to handle that to the states. So remember, the treaty basically means compensation. Okay, you're coming up with a truce between two warring parties, and the victor says, all right, you can have this. Considering the fact we took your land and whatnot, here you go. So that's essentially what it means. There's various processes happening at the state and territory level. It's hard to keep track now on which ones are still going through and which ones aren't, because governments may change. We may go to coalition governments who have actually somewhat grown a spine and have said, no, now we don't support these things. They only said it because the no vote was so convincing in the referendum, of course. But nonetheless, it's better than nothing. And Albanese is saying, well, look, we don't want to be part of it now at all. And, remember when Albo wore that T-shirt that said voice treaty truth? He wore it through midnight oil.
He didn't mean anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he had to somewhat go in damage control and say, no, we don't, all right, fine. Treaty is part of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, but we're just focused on the referendum right now and nothing else. So, that was always the most controversial part, I think, of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, because treaty means a lot of money. It means an absolute shitload of money. Just look at other countries where they have done this, like with the Maoris and Inuits in Canada, that kind of thing.
Oh, God.
It ends up costing a lot.
And it's not just one payment, by the way.
Of course not. It'll be ongoing. It always is.
It's a subscription.
Yes.
We are paying the rent.
Now, however, though, even though Albo's saying, all right, this is just a matter for the states and, nothing to do with the Commonwealth anymore, they are saying that they are taking the time needed to establish a federal truth-telling body and put its immediate focus on practical issues such as jobs, education, and housing and justice. That's a strange thing to say because, that's what the Voice was supposed to do. That the Voice was supposed to make recommendations for the well-being of Aboriginal people on issues like jobs, education, housing, and stuff like that. The whole purpose of truth-telling is a shaming operation. They've already got it in Victoria. It is where they actually go and they do not tell the truth. Okay, they tell either exaggerated or just outright fabricated stories of white abuse, of the kind of things that apparently happened during the Stolen Generation, in the Frontier Wars and all that kind of stuff. And it basically means we are forced to recognize these so-called truths in the terrible treatment of Aboriginal people. That's what it means. And like I said, look at the Victorian model. That's all it's ever been. It's all it's ever been. And not good enough. We're still actually going to get a federal version of it. So something to look forward to. Look, considering he said that they're going to take the time needed, he's saying they're not going to rush it. And I do think that Labor are getting a little desperate now with an election looming. It's not all that far away. And they know that it's going to be all about cost of living. And to be talking yet again about Aboriginal issues, even while the cost of living crisis is getting worse, is not going to look good. So I imagine that they basically just said this because of the Closing the Gap report coming out, because even the Coalition has commented a fair bit on it. But I'm predicting that this is going to go away pretty quickly. I'm predicting that the A News section that we do in the Races War each week is going to become a lot shorter. Unless there's more crime and stuff, of course, there's always that possibility. But in terms of actual policy discussion from the government and from state and territory governments, I'm predicting we're going to see a lot less of that. They are going to start hammering on the cost of living a lot more. That doesn't mean they'll do anything effective about it, but they will at least talk about it. Okay, now let's go to crime. So speaking again about the stabbing that happened 2 weeks ago in Queensland, part of the let me just remind people again, Labor made reforms to youth crime in 2016, part of which meant that detention, meaning the jailing of youth, could only be used as a last resort, and that skipping bail would not be a crime. So they since have gone backwards on the skipping bail. That is now a crime again. However, they did not change the provision that detention should only be used as a last resort. As we can imagine, there has been a shitload of pressure on the Queensland Labor government to go back on this, to say no, it should just be considered a measure in fighting juvenile crime, not necessarily a last resort. And yes, it could be used ahead of other intervention methods, if we want to call it that, into the lives of these people, of these fucking subhumans who stab grandmothers. Well, Stephen Miles is saying no. What he is doing, and this is so piss weak, when there was a court hearing for one of those Sudanese kids, there was no media allowed.
No.
Okay. There was no media allowed. And look, I'd have to look into this topic a lot more, but I'm not really sure where I stand on that because, okay, the public has a right to know and everything, but, you know, sometimes you can turn trials into just a complete media circus at the same time. That has an unfair prejudice on juries and other people involved in the process. Anyway, that's a whole different discussion. But anyway, Stephen Miles is now just saying that they're going to move for amendments to make it easier to allow reporters and other media into a courtroom where appropriate. So, well, gee, thanks for that one, Stephen. What about actually abolishing detention as a last resort? No, he's not going back on that. He's refusing. Now, I don't think he's going to survive the next election, which is October, I believe. He's not going to survive that. The polling has actually looked quite bad for a while. Switching leaders, going from Anastasia Palaszczuk to Stephen Miles, has not really changed things. In fact, some polls are worse because of the increase in youth crime. And it's not just this stabbing, by the way. There's a general increase in youth crime, and yes, it needs to be addressed at a racial level.
We could always ban knives in Victoria.
Okay, so that is actually one of the proposals as well, is they want to mete out harsher penalties, in particular for young people who are carrying knives or things that could be used as knives on their person.
Yeah, it worked in London.
Yeah. Okay. So, here in WA, we did actually have a 17-year-old. He pleaded guilty to 3 counts of assaulting staff while in detention. And a judge told him that he had been well and truly failed by the system. He was given a 12-month sentence, and this included for more than 24 offences, but nothing specific to the assaults that were perpetrated upon the officers. That included spitting and biting some custodial officers and hitting another with a metal plate.
Well, they're paid for that.
Right. So
wait,
the 12-month sentence.
They aren't.
The 12-month sentence, though, was to do with offences that he did outside of jail, in the community, whatever the hell he was doing, which were bound to be pretty serious. 12-month sentence for that. In youth detention, you must have done a lot. But anyway, can you believe it that our Labor government here, the Corrective Service Minister, Paul Papalia, actually condemned the judge for that sentence and said it was ridiculous, basically, that he didn't get punished for assaulting the officers. So he said it's not the role of a member of the executive. Sorry, what am I doing? I'm reading the Where is it? Oh, well, forget that. But it was just one of those examples where he actually did come out and say, no, this kid should have been punished. He should have received a harsher sentence, and he certainly should have received something that
You're
was,
only hearing this kind of rhetoric
insulting the officers.
because, again, from my contact in the, the CO system over here, you're only hearing this kind of rhetoric because they've actually hit like critically low members of numbers.
Right.
Oh, sorry, member numbers.
Yeah.
That's the only reason we're hearing this rhetoric. This would be completely devoid from the conversation if that wasn't the case.
Right. So, how about, I know you've got to go Nolsey, so maybe we can wrap it up on climate and energy.
That'll probably be the best.
And before our power goes out here, no, in Victoria, I mean, you definitely know about this if you're from Victoria. About 620,000 homes and businesses got blacked out completely. So this was on Tuesday afternoon. It says about 530,000 were through power outages, caused primarily by down power lines, and another 90,000 by via load shedding.
Yes.
What is load shedding? Are you able to explain that one?
Load shedding is when you purposely black out an area because you are no longer able to supply power to that area feasibly.
Right.
Oh, without damage to infrastructure.
Right. So look, what they've been saying was at fault here was that AGL's one of their coal fire stations went offline, and this has caused a lot of the greenies to say, "Hey, well, look, fossil fuel energy isn't quite as reliable as what you tell us it is." You know,
Oh,
so it's
what
unfair to
really
always
went
be
offline?
Yeah, but my understanding, I did read out that bit about the power lines. Basically, the transmission between the plant and where it sends its power
The consumers.
were knocked out.
Yeah,
They were
that's the
because of
shot.
like really, really serious weather conditions that actually just blew them over.
There's the Yolang transmission lines and transmission company.
Yeah.
That
By the way, that
can
name
maybe be.
that's obviously an Asian name, right?
Yes, it is.
Well, where does that come? Like, is this to do with Chinese investments or what? What is it? Because it's AGL.
Chinese owned transmission.
Okay.
So basically, the shot is here that the transmission went out, and you could actually maybe like look into, or like maybe consumers could look into this company for compensation because they should have actually had backup lines and the ability to reroute power, because it wasn't the substations in the suburbs that went out. It wasn't the switching stations that went out. It was just the straight up transmission lines that went out between this one power plant. They should have been able to reroute from a Victorian Central power plant, but they couldn't because literally they did not actually foresee this thing happening, which they should have. But basically, we had this small cascade event that happened from one power line from one coal-fired power plant going out that turned into a cascade event of multiple suburbs needing load shedding and several being under pure blackout.
Right.
This should not happen.
No, it shouldn't.
At all.
And I also got a point, something I learned from Andrew Bolt about this. Those transmission lines were only recently constructed. And
Yes.
a couple of years ago, they had a very similar thing happen. That is, they had transition lines constructed in much the same way that collapsed due to bad weather conditions. There was a report done on why that happened, and basically it found that those transmission lines were not built for purpose. In other words, they weren't strong enough to withstand the elements that they were exposed to. But then, when they went and built more of them, they actually built them in the exact same way. So, in other words,
that's
even
when it
though
comes
they
to company
knew,
liability. That's why that company name is plastered all over all articles relating to this, because they probably are the company liable for this.
Yeah. So in other words, they knew what they were doing. They knew that like there was still a very high chance that the new transmission lines would get blown over by the wind, um, because they did before. And a report actually said, yeah, they're not built for purpose. You need to build them in a different way. Otherwise, they're just going to blow over again. And that's exactly what happened.
Failings of a traditional power system do not let anyone take you for a knave, saying that like, oh yes, green energy would be so much better in this, this instance. It would be so much more reliable. Like it could just switch on. No, green energy needs an inverter. Sorry, rectifying control inverter and actually no, sorry, I'm actually underestimating it. Battery, voltage converter, inverter, and then a substation. There's actually much more infrastructure for green energy in this instance than there is for a standard traditional energy or AC energy circuit.
Right. So, in conclusion, we can basically say that no, this was not like the failure of fossil fuels. And
No,
I mean,
the plant still ran at the end of the day. The plant was still ticking over and producing power. It just couldn't send it.
right. Yeah. So it was hardly like the failure of coal-fired power or something.
No, it wasn't. It was inclement weather and bad contractors.
Yeah. I mean, you want to see like real failure. Look at like the blackouts that they had in South Australia a couple of years ago. That was all to do with their switch into various forms of renewable energy. Okay, well, we might just leave it there. I think I might pick up on this. You've got to go, Nolsey. I might just finish this tomorrow by myself. I'll do a little half-hour speed run for the listeners for the remaining content. Okay. Well, yep. Thank you, Nolsey, and I will continue the show from here. Okay, well, aren't you lucky you get to only listen to me for the remainder of the show? So, one other climate and energy piece of news here, and this is about the price of nickel. So, nickel prices have plummeted. I've heard that some of this can be blamed on other Asian countries simply just producing more of it. And we have a lot of prices in Australia when it comes to mining. So, they're obviously taxed, and they're taxed pretty heavily. But then there's other things like royalties and paying a fee to dig up particular minerals. And when it comes to nickel, it seemed to be just way too much, considering what has been an absolute collapse in nickel prices in about the past year. So anyway, because of that collapse, nickel prices, nickel will be put on the critical minerals list. And that means that nickel miners are able to access a $4 billion fund. So the Federal Resources Minister, Madeleine King, said that move would have significant ramifications on the state's nickel industry. And it comes after news that BHP is going to mothball their Nickel West division, basically meaning they're going to close it down but keep it in order. But for the time being anyway, it's basically not returning a profit or not enough. So they're going to be mothballing it. And it looks like that is risking the jobs of thousands of workers at the moment. So, before when I was talking about all the economic indicators being bad for labor, maybe you could perhaps say look at sectors of the economy, and they could say, well, okay, fine, construction, housing, that's not going all that well. But hey, look at mining. Mining is doing okay. No, it's not. No, it's not. Even mining is not doing well in this market at the moment. Okay, let's go to state politics. So, we're actually going to have another state election before Queenslanders go to the polls. So that is happening in Tasmania. this is not actually all that surprising. In fact, I think I said a week or two ago that the only way the current Liberal Premier of Tasmania, Jeremy Rockcliffe, can say that his government or his leadership is genuinely legitimate or has a mandate would to be to go to an election and win it, because they've just been hanging on a knife edge in minority government for so long, and there's been so many threats from independent MPs saying, well, look, we're going to withdraw support in the lower house if you don't do X, Y, and Z. So this has been lingering for so long, and a lot of people have just been saying, hey, with a parliament in this sort of precarious position, don't you think that you should be going to the polls? Well, that's actually what they're doing. So, as I record this, it's only the 17th of February, and Tasmania's election is going to be on March 23rd. So, what's that? Only about 5 weeks away. So, yeah, pretty damn soon. And of course, we've got the Dunstan by-election coming up in South Australia as well. So, what am I thinking here? Actually, no, sorry. Let's just go through the main players, going by this ABC article I'm going through. So, obviously, Jeremy Rockcliffe from the Liberal Party, the last Liberal leader in either the state, federal, or territory levels of government. And he's going up against the Labor leader, Rebecca White, who was a former political staffer. She was elected to the Tasmanian Parliament at the age of just 27. And she stirred up controversy with an ad taking aim at fellow Labor MP Michael Polly. That's one of her claims to fame, I guess. She became leader back in 2017. So, yeah, I mean, she's got over 6 years of experience. That'll go a long way. She did, however, lose the last two polls. So, this time, they are looking to end around a decade of Liberal rule. And then, of course, you've got the Greens as well. You've got Rosalie Woodruff, who's their leader. She's an epidemiologist. And, the Greens usually actually get a few lower house MPs in Tasmania. Even though Tasmania, I guess you could say, is one of the, let's say, more conservative states, they still managed to get a lot of Greens up and running at the state and the federal level, actually. Remember, the Greens actually have their origins in Tasmania. But these are the old school hippies, rather than the new school hipsters, in a way. They still have them. They still have these old boomers who are very supportive of the Greens, and they sort of keep them alive over there. And, there's still a few hipsters over in Tazzy as well, just not as much as on the mainland. So look, I'm not sure what's going to happen here. I'm going to go and say, if I am going to predict something, I'm going to say Labor for two reasons. The first is what I mentioned before about the precarious position of the government and looking like the government lacks authority, lacks a mandate. That just doesn't go well, public relations-wise. And people are going to say, I see this current government as too unstable, we need to replace it. But there's also just an time factor. We're talking about nearly 10 years of the Liberal Party being in power there. So, on that, it looks like maybe Labor will win this. But the only thing that would go against them, and this will really be a test of Albanese's leadership, of course, is how much people are blaming the current cost of living crisis on Labor. If they really kind of see this as something that is a result of failed federal Labor policies, well, they might then say, well, I don't trust a state Labor government, because what are they going to do? They're going to do more of the same. So that'll definitely be part of that battleground, I'm sure. And yeah, I look forward to doing a race to decides on that in only just over a month's time. And we have yet another scandal regarding the declaration of shares to the Northern Territory Parliament. So we might remember that Natasha Files had to resign, or she didn't have to, but things just kind of got that way for her. That resignation surprised me, to be honest, because it was just she kind of acquired shares by accident and forgot to declare them. In this case, we've got the Deputy Chief Minister, Chancey Pake. I had to make sure I found a video with how to pronounce his name because it's a very unusual name. So apparently, he has failed to declare shares in a company that have been involved in the wholesale distribution of alcohol in Alice Springs. So, yeah, I guess you can see why that's a little bit of a conflict of interest there. The government obviously deals a lot with all of the licensing laws regarding alcohol consumption, and they have to be even more careful with it in the Northern Territory than other parts of Australia because, well, there's a lot of Aborigines there. No one would ever say that, but that's the obvious reality. So, the thing about this, though, you want to know how many shares he's got, like the value of the shares. This is in wholesale and met cash. He has a whopping $430.60. That is just such a pitiful amount that I can't see how that would sway him one way or the other. Look, nonetheless, the rules are what they are. This is not as serious as Natasha Files because, like I said, she basically acquired those shares by accident. It was to do with like a buyout of another company, and then she kind of acquired new shares and didn't really notice it happening. You can see how that's an honest mistake. In this case, well, no. It's not like he got them by accident. He knew they were there, and he didn't make the declaration. So, I guess if Natasha Files had to stand down as chief minister, well, by the same standard, he would have to stand down as deputy chief minister. To Queensland, and we have some new polling data that has basically leaked. So this was actually secret polling that was commissioned by the Queensland Labor government under the then Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk. It has cost almost $400,000. And in terms of news for the government, it's all bad, pretty much. So it shows that voters have been unsatisfied with Queensland's performance on crime, housing, and generally being trustworthy. So the polling actually started last May and is continuing. So far we've had 10 waves of polling, and there's going to be more to come, and that's going to continue until June this year. So what exactly did it find? So the results for November, these are the most recent numbers we have, showed 23% of respondents were satisfied the Queensland government was trustworthy, which is down from 28% in September. Only 16% of those surveyed were satisfied with how the state was tackling crime, and 14% or less were satisfied with the state's performance on easing the cost of living and making housing more affordable. So there you go, all the metrics that really matter. And, crime is obviously a very, very big state issue, not a federal issue. And, I'd like to see what kind of polling are they getting for February? Considering we've just had this stabbing murder of an elderly woman, I suspect it would be a hell of a lot worse. So, look, going by the data that the Labor Party itself has commissioned, I think pretty safe to say we're going to see a change of government come October. To Victoria, the Liberal Party, we've got a bit of information on who exactly is funding the legal defence for opposition leader John Pesutto, who, of course, is being sued by a former Liberal Party room member, Maura Deeming, for associating her with Nazis and extremism. So we might remember that, by the way, I think it's September. I think we're finally going to get to see this battle fought out, meaning that it's going to cause some excruciating pain until then, and probably for some time after, obviously it depends a lot on who actually wins. It's going to be extremely damaging to the Victorian Liberal Party if Moira Deeming wins this. But anyway, the Liberal Party itself in Victoria refused to fund this. They said that, this isn't the kind of thing that we do. Those party funds are meant for a lot of other things, and we can't be creating a kind of moral hazard which would basically encourage leaders to go and say defamatory things because they know that the party is just going to back them up in court with the adequate legal defense fund. Make your own mind up on how you see that. But ex-premiers, Jeff Kennett, Ted Baillieu and Dennis Napthine, all ex-Liberal premiers, of course, they're all helping to fund his campaign here, which is going to be well over $1 million, I would say, because that's probably how much they've managed to raise for the other side, for Moira Deeming's side. And, well, on that debate of whether or not the Liberal Party should actually fund this defence, Jeff Kennett says that it's a disgrace, actually. He's very, very critical of the Liberal Party for not actually backing them, saying that it's sort of a betrayal of the leader. Well, the thing is, Jeff, a lot of people think that as a leader, he has betrayed the members. So, why would they be keen to kind of put their hands in their pockets to help him? Because a lot of them like Moira Deeming. The first time they tried to expel her, it didn't work. There's, believe it or not, enough capital C conservatives in the Liberal Party to still feel slighted by how she was treated and how she was kicked out of the party. So, yeah, going by that, I'd say it's fair enough that they don't want to fund it. So just quickly, there is another by-election coming up. This is the one in Dunstan. This is at the state level of South Australia. So this is coming about because of the resignation of former Premier Stephen Marshall, who was in for only one term, I believe. That's just the way it is in South Australia. The Liberals don't get much of a shot over there. But look, this is safe Liberal Party seat. It's going to be held on March 23rd, which I think is that the same date as the Tasmanian election. I think it might be. Yes, it is. It's the exact same date. How about that? So, yeah, that means some people, anyway, who have residency in both states would have to have two elections to actually vote in. But yeah, look, I'm not going to pretend like I know a hell of a lot about South Australian state Liberal politics. So all I'd say, just on the surface of it, that I'd say that probably the Libs are going to retain this seat just because it's blue ribbon. Okay, so to federal party politics. Few quickies, few ones are, there's one here I will go into a little bit more depth, but Linda Reynolds is resigning. So, from the federal Liberals, of course, I'm surprised she didn't resign at the last election, to be honest, because of all the stuff with Brittany Higgins that's been going on. Remember, Brittany Higgins claimed that she was raped in the ministerial suite or the office of Linda Reynolds at Parliament House in Canberra. That's the whole claim. It's really frustrated me how Linda Reynolds has not come out and used harsh language against Brittany Higgins. Considering that Linda Reynolds basically claims that she was sent to hospital with heart problems over the stress that was caused by the questioning from Penny Wong and Katie Gallagher in the Senate regarding the treatment of Brittany Higgins. And, you could maybe on the one hand say, well, maybe that's why women shouldn't be in politics, if you can't if you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen, that sort of thing. But at the same time, she wanted to save all her ire for the Labor Party, which, is fair enough. They've obviously worked hand in glove together. But I'd also just say, well, yeah, but what is the real source of all of this? Who's the one who made up this stupid story in the first place? It's obviously Brittany Higgins. And it's just ever so frustrating that every time she is interviewed about it, she is oh so careful with her language so as not to say mean things about Brittany or anything, even though she says that she thinks Brittany Higgins is lying, right? But she'll couch it and say, well, look, my version of events is simply different from Brittany's. She'll say some shit like that. It's like, what? Okay, so what you're saying is she's lying. Why can't you just say that? Can't you just come out and say it straight that she has been lying the whole time? It was a lie then, it's a lie now, and the bitch should be taken to court for defamation. All right, just like 10 is being brought to court at the moment by Bruce Lehrman. I wish she would have done that. Okay, now we've all seen the video or the stills of Barnaby Joyce, who apparently just fell off a little, one of those little things on the road that holds plants in it. Not quite a pot plant because, we all know what it is. Anyway, I just can't remember what it is, the name of it off the top of my head. So, he fell off it while he was on the phone, pissed. He was apparently talking to his wife, Vicky Campion, and when he did fall off, for some reason, he thought it would be a good idea to continue the conversation he was having while lying down, instead of getting up quickly to seat himself back up again. So, of course, he left it with enough time for someone to film him. And the funny thing is, he said, oh, look, had I known someone was there with a camera, I would have gotten up a lot sooner. Okay, but Barnaby, you were in the main entertainment district of Canberra. At least that's what I'm reading. I don't know anything about the main entertainment in Canberra, but that's where you were said to have been. And you were said to have been on a very busy street with other people, walking out of bars and stuff. So there was a lot of people around you, and you're probably lucky that only one of them filmed you in the end. So, no, you should have been a hell of a lot more cautious about that. But look, he's now blaming the kind of the stupor state that he was seen in, because he was taking prescription drugs of some description. I don't think we know what they were, and then mixing it with alcohol. But yeah, he didn't, as far as I know, he did not say what the prescription drugs were, and he also didn't say how much alcohol he had. He just simply said he mixed it with alcohol. The fact that he didn't give the amount suggests to me that it was a hell of a lot. And he turned up at Parliament the next morning. He seemed fine, though. Maybe he might be one of those guys just able to shake off a hangover really well. Although he's 56. I don't know how you do that, Barnaby, because I'm nowhere near your age. And, as soon as you kind of get past 30, the hangovers become brutal. So I don't want to know what they feel like when you're 56. But look, should he resign over this? No. It was just stupid. That's all. He was acting like a bit of a fool. He got himself into an embarrassing situation. Does this actually affect his capacity to do his job as a member of the National Party, as a shadow minister, etc.? No, I don't think so. And, Tony Abbott once missed a vote in Parliament because he got drunk in his office. A lot of people have moments like this. Mark Latham broke some guy's arm while he was drunk. Who else? The old leader of the Democrats, I forget his name now. He did it as well. There's endless stories of this, endless amounts of stories. So, no, I think he's fine. And I also would not say that he needs to take personal leave or whatever to get his head together or whatever it is. That's what David Littleproud has been suggesting. And as far as I know, Barnaby has not taken up that offer, and he just simply plans to remain within the job. Okay, real quick on federal Labor. Well, Albanese is getting married. He actually popped the question on Valentine's Day, as a lot of people do, I guess. And it made a fair bit of media coverage. Now, you could be real cynical about this and say, is this for his own gain? Politically, would it actually help him out in the polls or whatever? Yeah, it could do. I mean, they often say that when a politician is humanized, that they start to do better in the polls. And that can actually include something bad. So it could even include what I was just saying about Barnaby Joyce. Even though it would have been embarrassing footage, I do remember when Kevin Rudd was revealed to have visited a strip club in New York, his polling numbers went up. Actually went up because, as the commentators told us, the event humanized him. It's made him seem more like a regular person. So I guess, Albo popping the question and that makes him seem a little bit more human. And it might make him a little bit more endearing for female voters, I guess, because, I'm going to be cynical here. When it does come to like the personal lives of celebrities and even politicians, it's only ever women who really care about that stuff. So long as they like his wife, they don't think she's a bitch, Jodie Hayden, then it could actually work in his favor. But with the way the economy is going now, and with unemployment, in my view, that is going to soar quite soon, it's not going to be enough to, it will look. He might get over the line in the next election simply because he doesn't have the it's time factor working against him. But that would be it. I would say we're going to look at a significantly reduced Labor majority at the least. Okay, so back over to some issues. Let's talk a little bit about health. So we've got a private member's bill that has just been moved by independent MP Kate Cheney. This is in the federal parliament. And I don't like the sound of this. This one is about legalizing telehealth consultations for people wanting to access voluntary assisted dying. So in other words, these are appointments regarding your decision to euthanize yourself over the phone or over Skype or Zoom or something like that. No, I mean, I said basically when I started hearing about these laws mainly getting passed at the state level, that I was vaguely for it simply because I do think there are fates worse than death. And I think that once you get to the end of your life, very often because of various ailments that you have, I'm sorry, but some people are actually better off dead. And I know if I, was in a state where I couldn't wipe my own ass or something, I don't think I would want to really live that life. That's not a very dignified existence. So I think you should be allowed to access it, but the caveat I get was I want this to be extremely well regulated and controlled. It has to be very, very strictly monitored and allowed only when we can see that it's a genuine case of that person really is suffering, and it would be better off. They would be better off simply going peacefully. So this sort of threatens that. I mean, certainly the final decision. I don't know the details of this bill. Hopefully, she isn't saying that like the final decision on whether you live or die should be done via telehealth. I really hope she's not saying that. But nonetheless, I think, pretty much all of these consultations should be done in person because it needs to be as well regulated as possible. Okay, and going to the NDIS, we've got some more numbers now, and they just never look good. So this is a scheme actually that costs around about twice as much as Medicare. And you think about it, it was only introduced in the Gillard years. It hasn't been around all that long, and it has absolutely fucking ballooned. So it's now $42 billion. And to put that in perspective, that's about the size of the foreign student industry in Australia, around $40 billion. Anyway, a lot of kids with autism or other developmental disorders and delay who should not be on the NDIS are staying on there. And one of the reasons for this is because a number of these kids who should be getting re-screened, like have their assessment done all over again to really verify whether or not they should be on the scheme, that's simply not happening. They're not doing it. So this is to do with issues within the bureaucracy. They're just incompetent in a way, in that they're not allocating the work to be done. But it's also to do with a shortage of staff as well. So we are told that the NDIS and Services Australia, which is Centrelink, basically the dole, that they're getting an injection of new employees to kind of clear out these backlogs. But just more on the NDIS here. I'm reading from the Australian. It says the NDIS caseload of young children surged last year as the number of 0 to 6-year-olds who joined the scheme skyrocketed 400% more than expected. Now, can I remind people that Bill Shorten talked about how there needed to be serious reforms to the NDIS pretty much as soon as Albanese took power. You know, they were looking at it and thinking, shit, these numbers don't look good. We really need to do something about it. Well, this was one of the years where they were supposed to be doing something about it. We're talking about only in the last year. The Albanese government's been around for about 2 years now. And so in the last year, you had a 400% increase of young children on the NDIS. So it doesn't look like whatever it is that they're doing so far is actually working. Okay, so, well, my next story was actually on Services Australia. So, yeah, there are said to be thousands of new staff that are joining Services Australia across the country. And this is to help, well, I like how the ABC word this. It says, turning around an agency struggling with recent performance and cultural problems. So we're talking about 3,000 new employees. That is quite a lot. And a $228 million further injection of funds. Now, why do they need to do all of this? Well, because the average waiting time on the phone for Services Australia has actually gone up to 40 minutes, which is a hell of a lot. And a lot of those people who are left on hold, they end up just hanging up. They just say, fuck it, I'm just going to give up. Now, in terms of the people who are actually turning up to the office instead, the rate of people who are abandoning their visit, so these aren't people hanging up the phone, they're actually gone to the office, and then they wait there, and they get so sick of waiting that they actually leave the office, or they've got somewhere else to go. That has actually increased 200% in the last year. So yeah, you can definitely see there that there are some issues. Okay, and finally on prostitution is our last story. It's set to be decriminalised in Queensland. And as far as I know, Queensland is like the only one that hasn't, liberalised its laws regarding prostitution. So under the current law, a sole operator sex worker, they are banned from working with one another under the same roof in the same business. So that's basically means you can't operate a brothel. You can't have like multiple sex workers working at the same place. And they cannot hire people for personal security. Yeah. So, I mean, that's basically what a brothel is. You know, it's a bunch of people working there. They're running the same kind of business, and they have security, and they have, condoms and whatever else to keep everything safe. Well, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of one of those people where it's like, all right, if prostitution has to be there, because it prevents street walking and all that kind of shit, okay, fine. But, it's still an immoral thing, and, don't go and hire a hooker and don't say like, oh, it's better off should be with a guy like me instead of some other dirtbag. Well, if that demand wasn't there in the first place, she would hopefully, you would think, be off doing a proper job, a proper honest job where you don't have to sell your soul like that. So I guess what I'm saying is, all right, fine. We can have it legal, but it still should absolutely be discouraged. Okay, well, that's where we'll leave it, guys. Sorry Nolsey couldn't be there for the whole thing. I feel sorry for you having to listen to just me the whole time. And I am sorry about us being a little bit late. We will endeavour to be with you at the regular time next week. But yeah, Thank you for listening to The Racist War and Everything. Check us out at theracist.biz, and we'll see you soon.